Thanks as always for listening. In this episode, Chris and I discuss something that every GM has to deal with at some point or another, and that is launching a new campaign, from making some preliminary decisions about the nature of the campaign and the story, to actually putting the thing together, to starting it off with that first session. If you want to jump right to the content, go to the 2 minute and 30-second mark, and we'll meet you there.
Hi, Jeremy.
So I'll just dispense with what we were just talking about. You're sick, and I've been sick. I am on the mend, but I still
Didn't
have this.
sound like it.
Well, no, I have this persistent. My problem is every cold I get goes to die in my sinuses, and it
Right.
turns into several days of congestion and unpleasantness. So that's where I am right now. And you're now coming down with something, or at least it's welling up to the point of
Yeah.
unpleasantness that you might not go to work. So if we're not in tip-top shape, blame the viruses.
We didn't have a choice. My initial thought, we've already skipped two recording
Yep.
opportunities. Once one, and then once because you were ill on Monday.
Yep.
And I was gonna, I don't know if I'll be able to do tonight. And then I realized that if we don't record today,
No
our
problem.
listeners will miss a week. So
You know what? Then that is that's us. That is our dedication. How's that?
there we go.
And so because of that dedication, you should like and subscribe. Leave a comment.
Yeah.
Join the conversation on our friendly Discord. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely leave a comment along the lines of hope you're feeling better.
Oh, right. Okay.
That'll be nice.
I'll take it. And I've done no gaming because I've been sick.
See, I have done gaming because I wasn't sick when I did
Okay.
gaming. And tomorrow night I'll probably still feel like crap and I'll still do gaming
Well, maybe it'll
because,
help.
well, Scott had a cold and gave it to both me and Brian. So like if I feel ill, I'm quite happy to just give him my cold back because it's tough. Revenge.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that, but I got you.
Well, if I give it back to him and he's ill over half term, I will feel justified. That will be karma. So yes, I played the Assassin's Creed Quick Start, which was relatively quick. So it's a nice, quick, easy to play system. But I'd be interested to see when the final version has differences from the quick start because it's much too difficult.
You know what? Send me access or send me a link to where I can get it. I'll take a look over it and we could spend an episode on it. So this is related, I think, generally topically, this, the idea of like you do a quick start, you do something new. What we're going to talk about today is something that is relevant to any and every GM,
Yeah.
and by extension, every player. How do you start a new campaign? And obviously, how we define starting a new campaign is at issue there. But let's talk about that briefly. I am in no position. I'm not going to start a new campaign. I'm actually a good way through one. Um, but I did recently start a new campaign. What are you thinking?
I'm about, I don't know about campaign. I'm about to start something new.
Okay.
So whereas the other stuff, like, so Outgunned, I only intended to be a one-off.
Right.
Assassin's Creed, because that was a one-off for Christmas. I intended Assassin's Creed to be a one-off because it was just a quick start. Now I'm going to play the Wrath and Glory Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game.
Okay.
And I'm not intending it to be just one.
Okay.
So like I'm definitely know like I'm running. I know what I'm running for the first session. I probably know what I'm running for the second session, and then after that, there's another set of like 4 things, and I'm planning to change characters. But I'll get into that as part of the thing. So actually, yeah. So whether it's a campaign or not, I am planning to start with a bunch of new characters and a bunch of new adventures. So campaign is beyond what I tend to do, but
let's do
I'm
this
at the
though.
start of something.
Let's just, for the sake of this conversation, let's define campaign or series of adventures loosely as meaning an intention to go well beyond just a one-off or 1 or 2 sessions. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know exactly how far this is going to go, but your intention is to go for at least several sessions and develop things.
I
How
think so.
do you start this? How do we want to define start? The literal launch of the campaign, i.e. like first session and or character creation, or do we want to more expansively define the word start?
I think you have to go before that because you can't just. There's always a before.
Sure, there is.
Now, some people call it session zeros. I hate that phrase because for some people, session 0 implies something very specific, and we
I
could
just
do
don't
another.
like things that get overused.
We could, yeah, that's totally true.
And the term is
I,
overused.
I don't like buzzwords. At some point, maybe we can do an episode on session 0, but this isn't it. But yeah, you need to have something before. You can't just like you and a bunch of people rock up and go, right, guys, we're starting a campaign, because before that, either the GM has created a bunch of the players' characters, or the players have created their characters, or there has to have been something. There is not a scenario really where you can just turn up, right, guys, we're playing 20. We're playing 20 sessions of this thing.
Yeah, we're going to play to level 16 in like a D&D style system.
For a start, if it's something that you haven't played before, someone has to read the rules.
Yeah,
the GM has to read the rules.
Yeah, let's be
God
honest
forbid
here.
players read the rules. So yeah, you have to have a bit before the actual starting, and the easiest thing to start with is either going to be, what do we want to play?
Yep.
Or someone saying, I want to play this, which is part of the reason people end up GMing, because the GMing, or the person who wants the GM, says, I want to run this, and everybody else goes, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now, I went before that for my most recent one, but we'll come back to you first.
I think where I'm thinking is starting the actual first session. That's a different animal, and that's downstream from where I'm thinking. But I'm thinking farther along than we're deciding on X. Where my mind is, that is, you and your group have decided you're going to play this system. You're going to play, which then brings with it a certain genre, and you have a general, call it an actionable checklist of decisions already made. Not like, well, what kind of space game do we want to play?
Okay.
I'm not at that. I'm well past the navel gazing point. Like, we decided we're going to play Star Trek, and we're going to be, a traditional Federation crew during that era. Like, that's where I am. That's been decided. Now we're at the point where we need to talk about actionable specifics, like who's going to play what, and how are we going to get this thing actually going? Because everyone's always excited about the first or second session, but I think you need to plan beyond that, not only as a GM, but as a group, in order to really get the thing going and give it the best chance of being successful.
I think it's this awkward thing that you need this kind of bit of space to get the feedback from the players, or a conversation about what we want to do, and the GM to be able to go and okay, this is what they want, and this is what I can do. Because, for example, so like we've decided playing 4K. Now, we came to that because I basically wrote a massive spreadsheet of all of the games that I fancied playing, which was like 40 long. It was stupidly long. It was like everything I either had and hadn't played, or like Infinity that I wanted to go back to. And some of them were just quick starts. And I just wrote on a big list, and I ranked everything from 1 to 5. And I got Scott and Brian to rank things from 1 to 5.
You sound like you're the kind of person who's taught math.
I like doing that kind of stuff. Because then I got to color code it and things.
Oh, my goodness.
It does it automatically. You just put it in a color scale and it'll do it by itself. But I got to add it all together.
How are your clothes organized in your? Never mind.
No, they're a bit of a mess. But
okay. Good.
But I like playing with spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. And that was why we did Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed was number 1. Now, of course, classic me, in between me doing that spreadsheet and then getting to the next thing after Assassin's Creed, I got interested in Warhammer 40,000, which was totally not on the list, and basically said to the guys, right, well, the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound was on there. So I said, look, you've put that near the top. Do you fancy playing Warhammer 40,000? I finally got a grip of how it was. The guy was like, yeah. So after we'd finished Assassin's Creed last week, I literally gave them the Warhammer 40,000 book, and I gave them the Soulbound book, and said, right, look through all these books and pick the kind of characters you're interested in playing. Unhelpfully, for Soulbound, Scott gave me a list of about 30 different archetypes across like multiple different factions and races. That is not helpful.
Probably did the opposite of what you had hoped.
Yeah. He's like, I was trying to be helpful by giving you choice. I was like, but you've got, anyway, Brian was more helpful. So by pairing Brian to that, I'm going to be able to go. That's for the future, but that's the thing. I can start thinking about that.
Okay. Which then helps you narrow down ideas for, decisions you have to make in an existing IP, like when it comes to things like what era and what
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
angle.
Yes.
Like
So that's the
taking Star Trek Adventures as an example, you have different eras. Obviously, if you're going to play a default Federation style game, you also have the difference between the type of starship, the mission profile, the overall type of adventure. Are you going to take the odd route and place the characters on a space station, and that's going to vary in what they're going to do by era
yeah.
as well. So yeah, those kinds of things, you need those limiters as a GM, or you present those limiters. Hey, I've got this idea to work within this IP, and
Yeah.
this is the cool angle. So you either suss that out of your players, or you present that to them if you have the idea.
I
But
think
you have
definitely
to, yeah.
that's the two way. At some point, you need some kind of you can just turn like I've already decided all this. Right now, make your characters within this really narrow thing,
And if they
or you
buy
can kind of
into
go
it,
the other way.
terrific.
Right. I want your ideas of where we're going to go. I'm going to go away and noodle about it a bit, and then maybe I'll make the characters that are going to fit into that. Now that's what I've done in this case.
Yep.
They gave me suggestions for the kind of character they like to play. I've then gone and looked at the resources I've got to, because I think Soulbound I may well end up just playing my own adventures. I'll use the bestiaries I've got and the books I've got,
Yeah.
and I'll do my own stuff. I won't use a pre-written adventure because the characters they're interested in playing don't fit into the pre-written adventures. Now, for Wrath and Glory, it's very much that you have these tiers of play. You get like tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and tier 1 are like just like your basic bog standard soldier or like scum ganger, and tier 4 like the ridiculous like Inquisitor and Space Marines.
So is
So
this measured in like the size of their shoulder pauldron?
yeah, it's not far
Okay,
off that. Yeah.
I figured.
And so I was actually, here's what we'll do, because they picked a variety. So I said, look, we'll leave the tier 3 and 4 stuff for later down the line when we understand the system and I've got more books. Here's what and that's the thing. I've looked at what they've suggested and I've come up with what I'm going to run next. So my initial ideas, and then I've started making the characters. I'm going to start off. We're going to play a few sessions. I've got pre-written adventures, so we can learn the rules essentially. So we can learn the rules with some basic characters that I made, which aren't complicated. Get a hang of the rules. If they die, it doesn't matter. And then my intention is sort of on the third session, we'll move up to the next set of characters. Will be tier 2, so they'll be more powerful, but they'll also be more complicated. And then there's a set of adventures I can use for them.
So this is approaching a game that none of you have played. And so this is smart. And for our clever listeners, recognize in this, I think, a gem of wisdom. If you're going to run a game you haven't run before, whether your players have played it before or not, but I think more than likely, I mean, let's face it, the way it works out, usually if you haven't played it and you're the forever GM, they haven't played it either. You're the catalyst for them playing new games. And you have to program into your scaffolded, your sequence of how are we going to start the first session and what kind of adventure and where are we going to go next and next and next. You have to account for the fact that you're going to be learning the rules. They are going to be learning the rules, and that you will approach the game and the story differently than you would if you were proficient. That's really smart. I had not thought of that in those direct terms, but yeah.
I think then it makes a difference on what you're going to play, because if you're playing something like I haven't played before, I've read the rules, but I'm not really, by playing a thing that says this can be used as an literally says this can be used as an introductory adventure for characters of tier this and this. Well, that's great because it's already designed to be like one of the initial ones. I mean, actually, the one I picked is great. It almost assumes that the characters like have kind of only got a fuzzy idea of sort of where they are and what they're doing, so they can learn about the setting as they start.
Gotcha.
Because I think that's always one of the awkward things, particularly if you're going to an IP that your players aren't used to. How do you deal with the fact that, and you can come in the other way, how do you deal with player knowledge versus character knowledge?
Right.
Because in some settings, there's the characters should have knowledge and the players have like no knowledge.
Right.
And then you have things like in Star Trek and maybe Star Wars where it's the opposite.
Depending on the person.
Where the player knowledge is insane and the character knowledge is, reasonable.
Yeah.
So then
that's a really good point. And so you need to take that into account. The worst thing you can do, especially, and we all do this as GMs, you get excited about an IP. you get excited about a campaign, especially though with an IP where there's rich canon, whether it's, wherever it's from, and your players don't know it very well. And you buy it. Like, let's say even you didn't know about it, but you're like, oh, I'm finally going to give into the shoulder pauldrons. And so you buy the book and you're like, oh, this is so great. And you're just like, num, 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 num. And you gobble it up like cereal. And then you're like, come on, players, be excited. And they're just staring at you like, I don't really know like what this is like. And you cannot do the thing that so many of us would be inclined to do. Like, here, read this.
Yeah.
Come back now. You can't give your players homework. You have to get them excited about it and into it if they're not already. And then you can dole out things over time. But I think the key in this moment right now is when it comes to the rules and when it comes to the backdrop, you have to take into account a slow ramp up if the rules and that backdrop are new to the players especially, but give yourself credit and a little bit of grace as well to not, and don't get too excited and like fire hose puke a setting on them.
I think this is why sci-fi is much harder than fantasy. Well, that's not true. It's much harder than sort of medieval fantasy because of Lord of the Rings. But even before Lord of the Rings, just the kind of, there's the standard idea because of Lord of the Rings. But
like
before
it or
we had
not, there's like, you can just say it's like that. And
before we had the Lord of the Rings, people have an idea of what things look like in history. So we know what a knight looks like. We know what a bandit looks like. We know what a horse looks like.
It just looks like the English countryside.
Exactly. And if it's another country, so if we're further ahead, right, we know what the Renaissance, because we've got the Musketeers, and then we've got, Da Vinci, and we have these we can go further back. We've got the Greeks. We have this historical touchstones. We have an idea what fantasy looks like. So it's that, but there's a dragon. Or like the orcs, the orcs are just inserts for other things. So it's easy. The trouble with sci-fi is that it's fine when it's sci-fi that people have seen. Oh, it's like Blade Runner. Okay, it's like Star Wars, it's like Star Trek. The minute it's something different, and this is why I've never run Warhammer 40,000, because same problem we've got with Mutant Chronicles. I have felt that I don't really understand. I've read the lore, right? I understand the history.
What does it look like?
I understand the characters. Yeah, I get the factions. I get the interplay. What you just said. What does it look like? What's an average dude? He gets up. I mean, do they have beds? Does he have a shower? Just simple. Does he go and buy milk from a convenience store?
Does he sit in a park and read a book?
Yeah, it's just all that. And it's irrelevant. Your players are never going to do that. But that kind of stuff gives you an idea of what the world is like. I mean, I still don't have some of those answers for Warhammer 40,000. But I have enough of an idea through a computer game I've played that I have a feel for what it looks like, at least.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. So we have one thing nailed down, okay, in terms of accepting the fact that communicating system and setting is going to come slowly over time, and that you should be deliberate about how you dole things out. Like, I think that, and it'll be interesting to see what Modiphius does with the Achtung Cthulhu starter box whenever that comes out. But the original Star Trek Adventures beginners box, the mini campaign, which is made up of 3 adventures of a couple of scenes each, they were very smart about mechanically what kinds of things they included in those scenes in a sequential manner. So they help a new GM understand and apply the rules while doing the exact same thing with the players. They help them do that from a zero to hero kind of standpoint. Like, they don't touch starship combat until the second adventure entirely, until you've got the core mechanic down. They don't even touch combat until after you've done some basic roles. So I would approach your first adventure, look at, okay, how can I make sure that we are, as a group, proficient in using the core mechanic? Now, obviously, this is all moot if everyone knows the rules. If you're just playing another, you're using the same system, but you're just playing in a different scene, setting, whatever you want to call it, then that's all moot.
Well, then but even then, in something like, let's say you're playing 5e for the 10th time, there's always the chance then that it's a character difference. Someone's going to be playing a new character class they've never played. Or even in 2D20, I mean, there's so many variations too, but you might be using a house role you've not played before.
Yeah.
Someone is probably playing a character with rules that they haven't.
Yeah.
Maybe they've never used a magic user. Okay, maybe suddenly now they're going to be able to do something now. They got a bunch of talents. It's unlikely if you start a new campaign, the chance that all the players are playing things where the rules are exactly the same as what they played last time. So someone's always going to be playing with something new.
Yeah,
Even if you
that's a good
understand,
point.
even if it's the core mechanic, it could be other stuff could be massively different.
Yeah, I mean, all it takes, especially in a system like that, is someone to say, "Can I use this book too? Can I use stuff from Xanathar's or whatever?"
Well,
Okay,
that's a good thing actually to get into is the how do you decide who makes the characters and how do you do it? Because that is
okay.
an important
Let's
starting point.
tackle
I think.
that next because
Yeah,
that's I think that is regardless of whether people are new to the system or not, you need to put some consideration into that.
yeah. I mean, personally, I've kind of got to the point now. I hate having a session making characters. It is the slowest, most painful. It feels like a waste of time.
Oh, see,
You're
I'm the
sitting with your,
opposite, but
you're sit.
I
You go.
approach it maybe
So
differently
what I found is that I see my mates once a week, so gaming time is
at a
it's
premium.
valuable. Spending a session just making characters isn't ideal. Now there are exceptions to that. Something like Infinity, where it's got a life path, or something. I remember they all fate things we had to, where
Yeah.
you need to make a character in conjunction with other people so you can make the links between the characters. That's one thing. But for most games, having to sit there and especially if you've got one copy of the book, you've got the book. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just such a slow process, and you have
Yeah.
to explain the things you do it, and you're passing the book around. And that's me. That's me with two players.
Yeah.
I've had things where we've spent 3 hours
So,
making two characters.
okay,
I
so
think this is
how do you handle this? Because you are averse to a character building session or a session in which characters are being built, whether it's the whole session or not. You're averse to that. What's your solution?
Yeah. So what I've kind of taken to doing recently is basically like, throwing them the books while we're doing something else and kind of just saying, right, what kind of character are you interested in playing? And that's what I've done for 40K. What do you fancy playing? They picked some things. I've gone away. I'm making up the characters that are, mostly the stats. Now, before we start on tomorrow night, the first 10, 20 minutes, I'll give them the book back and go, right, you need to come up with your characters, personality. Here's a rough backstory for your characters based on stuff I've picked. They can change it if they don't like it, but you need to come up with some personality traits and the character's name. So they've got some ownership of the character. They've come up with the initial archetype. They know what their character wants to be like, roughly. I'm going to do the mechanical side of it. They're going to finish off. So that what the person is like, that's theirs.
Sure.
But the mechanics of it, which is the thing that takes the time, I'm going to do that
And
because
so,
I
but
managed to cram it in during the week this week.
but you're doing that based on your knowledge of your players and also their direct suggestions
Yeah,
or ideas from so you're not just making it's not just like a con where people are showing up and you're handing them pre-gens
no,
and you're saying you can make up the name. You're giving them a almost completed character minus those other pieces that itself was informed by your knowledge
yeah.
of them and they're okay, all right,
And
I can dig that.
when we did D&D, when we did D&D, it's different. Brian will quite happily make his own characters. I make
Okay.
Scott's characters for him. We do not let Scott make characters
Well, you know what
because
though?
it would take Brian. He'll do it. Scott would just take too long, and
I
he would get
think
lost in the book somewhere. And it's like, right, Scott, what do you want to play? I want to play this. Right, I'll make them because again, the kind of the important thing is like, right, I want my character to be able to do like sort of this and this. This is my vision for the character. When we did D&D, we picked the art. We found the art we liked, and we started with the art. That's what I want my
interesting.
character to look like. Right, that's what they look like. What class will match that? What things will match that? Come up with a backstory, and then I'll do the mechanics because the mechanics isn't maybe necessary. The mechanics is it's how you play the game, but what the character acts like and what they're
Yeah.
going to be like that
Yeah,
might
you know
depend on
what? Again, that goes back to this issue of your players.
Yeah,
We're not talking about you're not going to run by our definition of campaign for the sake of this episode. You're not going to run this for a bunch of strangers.
no.
You're going to run this for people Okay.
So what do you do then? Because you
Okay.
clearly do a character building session.
Well, it depends.
Okay.
It depends. However, my preference now is to give give the players, ask them, say like once we as a group have decided this is, we're going to run Star Trek adventures on a ship doing primarily exploration missions during this era. Like we've nailed down those big picture limiters. I have invited the my players to share, like we'll share online on we have a Discord for our group, and we'll knock around ideas like, I think I'd like to play this kind of character. I think I'd like to play that kind of character. Um, and this is based on their knowledge of the rules. And then what I do is kind of guide, facilitate, proctor, whatever you want to call it, a conversation over a period of, like a week or two or so, where we will nail down the role, whether that's a formal thing in the rules or not, a role for each of the characters, for each of the players. And then because they have the rules themselves, I'll have them make their characters themselves.
But they're not doing it at the table. Then they're doing that away
They're
from the
typically,
table because
they're
you've done
typically
it over
doing
Discord
this
and stuff.
on their own, because they have the rules themselves. So they make their own characters, and then they will share them. We'll share them electronically with one another. I can take a look over them. They
Yeah.
can take a look at and know. Like for example, a couple of months ago when we were preparing to start Kingmaker with Castles and Crusades. Castles and Crusades was a game that no one
Yeah.
had played before.
Yeah.
We did a couple of short demo sessions so that people could understand how the rules were different, because coming from 5e, there were a lot of things that seemed deceptively the same, but they are not. And especially how different class abilities play out in the game. Things were very different than you would, if you looked at the character classes, you would expect, if you looked at them from a 5e perspective, oh, I know what these characters are going to be able to do. And things don't work out that way. It's just a different game.
Yeah.
So we took this same approach, and I had them make their characters, and then we came in and we tested out those characters. We demoed the characters they had made in these throwaway sessions, and then they refined them, and then we said, okay, let's go ahead and start playing. And that actually helped us start to adapt to the rules and get used to the rules and become, at a good enough level proficient with them so that we could play. That's something that I recommend also, is that, yeah, you definitely have to take into consideration what we had said before, like how you map out your early sessions to not try to like do all the rules at once. But it's perfectly fine to run throwaway sessions.
Yeah.
Or run a session, say, listen, we're just going to do 2 or 3 combat encounters, and you're going to start at max hit points or health or whatever it is given the system. And to not, I know that, and it was weird because I went through this a little bit. Your comment about like, hey, my gaming time with my friends is at a premium. I don't want to piddle it away doing stuff that I don't get a lot of fun out of. And when I realized that playing some encounters and freeing the players to just be like, oh, my character got injured or killed, doesn't matter, we're just going to start fresh, because we're just testing these things out. We had a lot of fun with those. A couple of years ago when we wanted to play Star Trek Adventures, we ran a whole session as a holodeck starship combat exercise. And it was just so that we as a group could get our head around the system. And it was just as fun as playing a regular session. So I think that's a good way to go about it as well. But yeah, I typically have them make the characters out of, and then bring them, and then we all compare. Now, soon I'm going to actually, for the next 2 sessions, I'm going to be running Eris, because one of my players has, her sister's going to be in town and they want to introduce her to the 2D20 system, and they like Eris and so on and so forth. So we're putting aside Kingmaker for a little while longer to run these 2 sessions. What I'm asking them to do is show up with a concept, and we're going to quickly make characters.
Yeah, because you can.
And I'm going to oversee that. We're going to do that in session, and we're going to get going pretty quickly. I found that if players have a clear idea and they're committed, you can get through character creation pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think with certain systems you get, and actually, as it turns out with the Wrath and Glory, if you use the archetype character builders, you basically have picked the character. Like because they picked their archetypes. All I really did was take the stuff it tells you in these archetypes, filled in the character sheet, and then had a few XP left, which I used to buy. And that was it. The points were gone. Like I think it was Brian's character. I had literally one choice what to do with the points that were left. That was it. That character. So I did nothing. I wrote it on the character sheet, but I didn't make any choices at all. He'd already picked, I want this kind of character. Scott's had marginally more. But I think, like you said, the good thing is essentially we're going to have almost 2 tester things.
Yeah.
If after 2 sessions they love those first 2 characters, basically their stats are terrible. So I think they're going to just fail everything. So I'm not sure they will. But after the first 2 sessions, if they go like, look, we really want to keep these 2 characters, then we'll probably I can just carry on with them. But I suspect we're like, well, look, let's move on to these other 2. Or it might be they go, screw it, let's play 2 characters each, because we've done that a bunch of times.
Well, okay, so we have this first step of this, narrowing down and placing, choosing system, choosing setting, obviously, narrowing down and placing some limiters in there so character creation becomes possible. That's relevant to what you're going to do, and GM planning is possible. Got a couple of different approaches that I think, depending on whether you know the system or not, or they know the system or not, and how your affinities within your group or not. We got character creation. So now characters are done.
Yeah.
We've taken these first 2 major steps. What for you comes next before that inaugurating session where you hold the starter gun in the air and boom, and you're playing?
I mean, essentially as the GM, it's the what am I doing? And we've done episodes on this already in terms of what we're doing, the difference in adventures and campaigns and a series of adventures, and the difference between pre-mades and campaigns and so on. But that is up to the GM. Well, it's up to the GM to some extent, because if it's like, well, we've only got 4 weeks, but then something's happening, and or with someone else, we've only got a limited amount of time, then that would change things, obviously. But like, you do have to have that thought. Is this an open-ended campaign which is going to run until everyone's sick of it? The classic, the one that I hear about and I've done as a kid, that we're going to start at level 1 and we're just going to play,
right?
See where it takes us, and it's in a world, and we'll just build from that there. Kind of campaign. We play as you see, or is it more of a defined, like a Star Trek season approach where there's an overall bad guy and we're going to a bunch of sessions, but there's something happening in the background, and we're maybe going to play for 10 sessions. That's kind of thing. I've done like something like playing like Castle Revenge of Strahd, whatever the hell it's called. Why can I never remember the name of it? But that was very much right. We're going to play this until we get to the end of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's handy if you are taken with, if you see a published adventure or campaign, you go, wow, that looks really cool. Yeah. Then whether you finish the thing or not, the easy thing is already there, that you could just play it through to its completion. I think that's important to have some sense of. I think that people can make unrealistic commitments out of too much optimism. I remember, I don't know, not long after 5e came out, the group that I was GMing, they really wanted to play into high levels. And I have never been a fan of GMing high levels.
I've never got that high.
Well, yeah, things happen. And I remember being very excited. I was like, I'm going to commit. We're going to make it to at least 15th or 16th level. And I just remember looking back a few months later, how unrealistic and silly of a promise that was. And I fooled myself. But yeah, I think some sense, especially for the GM, if you want to build a story, especially if you're writing the story yourself, if you want to build a story that has foreshadowing, that has recurring NPCs, that, if you, not that you're going to sketch out the whole plot, which then turns into you're forcing your players to play characters in your book. That's a whole nother issue. But you have to have some idea as to how far is this going to go. I'm going to take this baddie and put him in my back pocket for a while, and he's going to come back later and he's going to steal your sister, kidnap your sister, or something like that, and that'd be cool. You have to have a sense of generally how long is this going to go for. I think that's sitting in the background.
I think you definitely
how far you think you might want to ride this thing.
Once you've got the characters, and before you actually start, you need to have the idea right. What am I doing? Am I gonna that, because because the easy thing is to do kind of arcs. Okay, I don't actually know if we're going to run this forever or not, but if I go in a, pick a time period, not a time period, like a time period in terms of sessions, right?
Yeah.
I think, I'm going to pick a good number. I'm going to go between sort of 5 and 10 sessions. I'm going to aim to finish the first arc in that, right? So I'm going to introduce this threats. I'm going to introduce these NPCs. I'll aim to have kind of the big confrontation with a big bad, thinking sort of TV series terms at the end of that period. And then we can move on from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think, to be honest, plan further ahead than that. And that's why I quite like, the D&D books, I ran Strahd in less than 10 sessions. That you can make them take longer, but you're talking between 10 and 15. So that's a good chunk of time. You're talking 3 or 4 months to get that.
Yeah.
That's a real, go thinking beyond 3 months in a role playing realistically.
Well, there's another
failure.
angle. You can see this from another angle also. You can look at what's going on in the real world. For example, we know that in most cases, I've heard this from tons of people, like you get up, you get to late November to like early January, and because of Thanksgiving through Christmas, holidays, if you've got kids, school semester ending, things like that, relatives coming, that like your schedule for gaming gets all wanged up.
Yeah.
When people go on vacations and things like that happen. So you say to yourself in August, okay, I'd like to be done. I have until like mid to late November when everyone's schedule is going to get dicey and a really great campaign is going to get derailed potentially.
Yeah.
So what do I want to reach by then? You've also got that issue. I think this issue of scope and timing is really important. You need to have in the back of your mind, even if you're using a published adventure.
That's where we messed up last year playing D&D, because at the start of the year you said, right, we're going to play
D&D in the first place is what you do. Anyway, no.
Wow. It's such an easy dig.
It was cheap.
We said, the Dungeons & Dragons film is out. We're going to play D&D for the whole year. Okay, but where we're wrong is the kind of, actually, if we'd sat down and thought about it, we should have realized we never do anything over the summer. Because there are 3 of us.
Stuff happens.
School holidays are 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We are all away at different times. Okay. If we all coordinated and made sure we were all away for the same 2-week period, we'd have the other 4 weeks. But the reality is because we've all got kids, we all take holidays during that time. And invariably what happens, we do not see each other for 6 weeks. And therefore things we should have said, we're going to play D&D up till it. And I remember I was like I said this year, it was sort of June time, and realizing we're not going to get all this stuff finished.
Yeah.
So I said, right, well, I am going to finish my storyline.
So it's two things. It's 2 things then. And this needs to be taking place in the mind of the GM. And to bring this up where relevant, as a conversation topic with players, this can go on while steps 1 and 2 are happening. As you formalize and think more about what the campaign, loosely used, is going to be, how far do you want to get story-wise? How does that express in the real world? And where will the real world intrude into, and how do you adjust the story pacing and the number of sessions based on that? Okay. Really quickly then, I saw that. So really quickly, we have these 2 steps that go in sequence and one that kind of weaves over them or sits over them. Your characters are made. You've got a story. You have a general scope. You know where you're going to start. How do you actually start the first session? Because I have an idea. A lovely idea, actually.
I mean, in the case of it, because I'm using a pre-written adventure, I'm just going straight into the first adventure. So go on there. What's your idea?
Okay. Thinking bigger and better.
Do they meet in a cantina?
No.
/tavern?
Actually, this has nothing to do directly with the story or the characters itself. All right. This is actually nothing to do with that. What it has to do with, I think, is setting the stage and the energy for you as a group to do the story and have the fun and do it well. And this is something that I have now done twice. And it worked really well both times. And I even had one of my players after this last time say, the next time we start a new campaign, let's do this. I was like, okay, cool. Let's do this again, that is.
Mm.
And so I absolutely, most certainly will. And that is to make the first session a special event for you as a group. Have a potluck. If you play in the evening, have dinner together. And I don't mean like crap food like friggin' Mountain Dew and pizza. Be a grown up, make good food, and have a meal together. And honestly, like here's what I did. Years and years ago, I decided we're gonna have the first time I did this. I took care of it all, and I made bread bowl beef stew in bread bowls. And then I found this some kind of 16th century British recipe for a here it comes for a cheddar cheese and apple pie, which was actually, I mean, it was like I wanted to run laps for about a month after eating it. I mean, it was like, this is so rich, it's really good. I'll just have one small piece anyway. And so what I did is I chose the food to make it kind of feel like the adventurer tavern kind of thing. So we, the players, kind of met in a tavern to play our game. Now this last one, I pulled some stuff out of the D&D cookbook. The best thing about D&D nowadays is the cookbook. I made the wood elf salad, which is the wood elf garden salad is glorious. It is so good. I made that. I made a stew. I took their stew recipe and I took some other stew recipes and I bastardized it and made something funky monkey, and that turned out really well. And then I invited everyone else to bring other stuff. So a friend of mine, Joe, made really excellent, what are those damn things called? Creme brulee. Wow. The little like burnt sugar on top. And he had a little torch that he brought and burnt them. Another guy, Drew, brought, he made like, he got these little, they look like little burlap sacks, like little adventurer, sacks of treasure, and filled them with like a really awesome trail mix so that we could have munchies while we were eating. And then Jody and Chuck, the couple that's in my group, they brought this excellent like mulled cider in a crock pot. All right. So we had our adventurer's feast. We met in a tavern to start our adventure. And it was just a lot of fun because it reminded us that like, hey, we're friends and we're having like, we can do this together and have this time together and then do this fun thing. And so we met a little bit, we met about an hour earlier and we did all that. And we're definitely going to do that. I actually gave Joe a hard time. I was like, is that because you want to just like, you already want to weigh off this campaign? You know, well, let's do this again in a month. Like, no, but we will absolutely do that. When in some point in the future, when we start a new campaign, I will oversee putting together a potluck meal that is at least points to the story we're going to do. So if it's Star Trek, we might have like weird spray painted space food. I don't know.
God.
But oh yeah. But we'll do that. So I think it was just really cool. It was a lot of fun, and it reminded us of one of the many reasons that we come together for these games, and then the feast pointed at the game. So, and then we played. And now they like Castles and Crusades enough. Or they like it. So it's been successful. So that's what I think we should do. Or you should do.
There's no way I'm
Chris,
doing that.
And you meaning those listening.
Yeah, I'm not going to. If I cook for those, I get pizzas and I cook.
No, man, it's so much fun. Like it's like when you are inspired to make your own adventure.
There's no way on a Friday night, having worked. You do this on a Saturday. Yep. We meet on a Friday night. Yep. I have worked a full week, so we get takeout. Proper
planning prevents poor performance.
Worked a full week and we don't want to cook. If I cook, it's because we're going to save money, and I get pre-made.
Don't you have a crock pot?
Yeah, we're not cooking anything like that. Mika does cooking like that. I cook.
Well, then you just grovel.
I'm not making Mika cook stuff like that. No, as it is, I moan at the other two anyway. Wow. So yeah, that is never happening. They get enough food from us already. They want to invite us to their houses for food.
Well, for those of you listening,
It sounds like a very nice idea,
it
but
was
it's
a lot
not
of fun.
happening here.
It was a
Yeah,
lot of
sounds good.
fun, and it took a little extra effort. It took a little extra planning, but it was exciting, and the food was really good, and sitting around and just talking and reminding ourselves that we like hanging out with one another for multiple reasons was good, and I think that it opened the door and opened up like a smooth on ramp to the game itself. And then, of course, for like, because these bags of snacks that Drew made were quite large, we had like adventurer iron rations for a couple of weeks.
But yeah, I think that sounds really good fun.
All right. So that's how you start a new campaign.
Well, that's how you start a new campaign.
That's how you do it. And then now that you've listened, you're supposed to
like, comment,
and
subscribe,
and
join the Discord.
Boom. There we go. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord, you can subscribe to the podcast, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.